Hello and welcome to this week's CAD class. And Dave's not with us this week. He's very busy running beings. And so the CAD children have been left in charge. So I'm doing the switching, so you're not going to hear very much from me this week. And if I press the buttons right in a second, hopefully you're going to get to see the rest of the gang who are with me. So welcome, hopefully, if I get this right, or Google Meet, hit cut, and we have Dick and we have the rest of the gang. And say hello, Dick, and then we'll go around the gang.
Hello, everybody. My name's Dick Crabb, and I'm a sound engineer.
And
Hi, my name's Tom. I do CAD drawings for live events and the theatre, and I look forward to running through some stuff this week.
And we have a very, very special guest this week, and we've been very kindly joined by Willis. Willis, do say hello.
Hello, I'm Willis Spencer. I'm a video bloke. I've worked in theatre, TV, music touring, and corporate events of various sorts.
That's absolutely brilliant. And I think this week we're going to start with Willis and ask Willis to talk about what he does with CAD and how he integrates it into his workflow in video. So Willis, please take it away.
Oh gosh, right. Hello everyone. I'm Willis, and I'm here to sort of give a video. Sadly, as many video people know, we don't really get involved in it, often because the screen size is decided many weeks before the event, and we're more of a case of here's a screen and it's going here, off you go, chaps, which is fine, because screens technically and typically are the same shape and they just need to be of a certain size. But depending on the technology you use, there are often things that people can forget about in the design, such as projection distance, projectors, for example, if they're being flown, not being on any other truss or flying points that lights are on, for example, because if the lights start doing their lovely thing, the projector will do that. And then the image goes all over the place and everyone looks at the video bloke and go, what have you done to our lovely pictures? And it's like, well, it's not my fault. Equally, if it's around the back and you're doing rear projection, you've got to think about the depth of the projector, you've got to think about the airflow, and if you stick it up against the wall, is it going to blow up? Is the wall going to catch fire? Because these things get very, very hot. So there are some very simple, practical things we can think about. LED screens, which are much more prevalent these days, there are so many different sizes and shapes you can do, but there are, again, things that people forget about. If you're ground supporting, for example, you have a header, which is often, 4 or 5 inches high, and then you have to have ballast to support it so it doesn't fall over, and bracing at the back, which can be anything up to 1 metre deep. And then in addition to that, you've got to get a person around the back in case there's a technical problem or a cable goes. And often people think that the screen is only 4 inches deep, and actually it's probably 1 metre and 4 inches deep. And that makes it operationally useful. And also thinking about, as you go up, is there an overhang in the room? You may have a Quaglinos, for example, is a venue I've worked in, where there's a little stage and you put the screen on there and then you hit the pros halfway and you go, oh, and you have to take everything down and move it forward a couple of feet and put it up. And all of these funny little things that can come along and ruin your day. So it's always nice to sort of avoid that if you can. And similarly with hanging, when you're hanging a screen will have pretty much a point that you hang off for every single column of LED that you have. And trusses are not always straight, motors don't always go up. And so you really need bottle screws on every point so you can do millimetre adjustments, because with the high-res screens, they simply don't have the tolerance that you need to keep everything perpendicular as it goes up. So little things like that, which then means you have a header, which can be, with a bottle screw, can be 300, 400 mil high, which can affect the overall look of the set. How do you hide it? Do you want a screen suspended in just on its own? How do you go about it? These things are possible, but it's the assumption. Don't assume, always ask, and there's always a friendly person that can guide you in the right direction, I think, with things like that. So those are some of the frustrations perhaps that we get, because, as I say, often we just get given a drawing and it's your screen goes there, which is fine, because we're not designers necessarily in the corporate event side. There are video designers, but in the larger ones, but they tend to get involved in the actual content design, working with the lighting designer and the show designer. So that's a different scale from the sort of corporate event side.
That's absolutely brilliantly and very, very, very fascinating. And could you talk to us how about you integrate with us, for Tom and I who produce production drawings, how we can help you and make it easier, and how all that integration can happen?
Well, one of the bits of software that we do use is a piece of software which is actually a media server software by a company called Disguise. It's called D3, and it's basic for those of you that have heard of media servers. It's a bit like Catalyst, but it's really, really powerful. And so what I've got here is a few examples of what you can do with it, which help with the presentation to the client, because it gives a very accurate 3D representation of what they're going to see when they walk into the room. So I'm just going to go into a presenting mode. So I've not done this before, so it's interesting. And there's my PowerPoint thing. There we go. And we'll go into the show. So that's just D3. So earlier this year, I worked on a TV show called Beat the Chaser, which, like lots of light entertainment, involves tons and tons of LED. And once we got it all working and we were sitting there on standby, I decided to draw it up. And what it can do is you can select the resolutions of the screens, you can put set pieces in, such as the sea that's there, and you can apply content to the screen to give an idea of what it looks like. This is a head-on shot, this is a side shot, and then here we have a shot of it with real people. And as you can see, it's pretty accurate. We're missing lights and we're missing audience, but it gives your client an idea of what they can expect when they walk in. Here's another shot of the chasers, who are the clever people who do the quizzing. And that's a really low-res shot off the internet. But it, again, gives you an idea of the visualization aspect. Sticking with the chase, when I was learning how to use this software, I had to get into 3D modeling and building bits of set. And the chase has lots of strange things, and it was quite a good exercise. But this also shows the power of this software just in a pre-visualization mode, aside from actually using it as a media server. So those of you that spent lockdown watching game shows in the afternoon may recognize this. That's the game board, and this just flies around the studio, so you can see where the screens are, and in a moment we'll be able to see one of the camera shots that they use quite typically during gameplay, which would have Bradley Walsh, who in this case would be the chap in red, and the poor contestant who's the one in green. And you can also see there's an idea of the resolution of the screen and what moire effects you may or may not get. So that can give you an idea of what you can show your clients, and you can apply any content to the screen, and you can then actually use it during the show.
So Willis, just so the practical elements, the bits of set, is that done within?
It's done within a bit of software called Blender.
Right. So you do that, is not an import? No,
but it can be imported. They can be, as long as they have to be in a file format, which is called a .obj, which is a 3D block. And then onto that, we can apply video surfaces if we need to, or just, as you can see at the moment, there's a bit of a stage that I built just to show this one. But as you can see here, there's a 3D arena that I've plonked a stage with some singers and some musicians. And this one just shows us how what on paper would sounds like a great idea, but may not work for quite a lot of your audience. So what it is a series of screens, horizontal screens, which are staggered, and they go downstage as they go up in the air. And from the sort of front of house position, it doesn't look too bad. But when you go up into the cheap seats, the effect is less memorable. And it gives you an opportunity, if you've had a slightly wild and wacky idea, to have a look at it, show your client and go, is the compromise worth it for those that aren't sitting right here in front of the sound desk with the perfect view next to the lighting designer and the producer? And there are advantages and disadvantages to the various different viewing angles. But this, again, shows the power of the sort of 3D visualizing software that is available, and integrating it within room plans or set designs. But this is, as I say, it's quite a simple.
So in the weeks before, when I've been talking about it from the sound side, I've been talking about the what the computer predicts against what I actually experience when I'm then doing the job. How is that for you? How did these renditions that you do, renders that you do, how do they compare with actually your experience on site?
Well, thank you for asking that, Dick. Here we go. British Summertime Festival in Hyde Park is a large summer rock festival that would be going on pretty soon if we weren't all staying at home. And as you can see, there's an awful lot of LED screen there, tons of it, and there's 2 very large scenic trees and 4 quite large speaker hangs. And the LED screen gives you an infinite number of possibilities, but equally, the bits of stage set and speakers can create their own problems. So what the company Video Design, who supply all the equipment for the video equipment, do is they've created a version in disguise of the set. So we have the set pieces and the speaker hangs, which have been brought in from the CAD drawings of the stage that have been supplied probably by Stageco, I think, who built the stage, and the set designers. And this then enables you to see what people's view would be like. Now, this isn't a flyby. I've just taken a number of screenshots. So this would be the head-on version. This is from stage left. And you can see where people's views start to get obscured because the screen has a bit of curve to it at the edges. And likewise from the other side. And you can see where the speakers hang. So when bands and artists turn up with their software, they already know where their singer's head is going to be in relation to some of these large immovable objects that the designers have put in. And it means that they can do the show with confidence. And I sat there last year doing overnight sessions with bands coming in. And because we've gone on one too far there, because they've been able to see these lumps sitting in front of the screen, they've been able to design their software accordingly. Inevitably, you're going to have tweaks and you're going to move things about because virtual and reality are, whilst they're very closely linked, they're never always perfect. But it gets you 98% of the way there. And again, it gives your client, whoever that may be, a level of confidence as to what they're paying for and what they're going to walk in. So you don't get the classic, gosh, I didn't think it would look like this, even though they've been given presentation after presentation. It just adds a sense of reality. And I think there's some lighting software that can also do a similar thing. Depends, I think you were saying, is the name, which is WYSIWYG Advanced. And all of these things are there. Obviously there's a cost to them, but sometimes that can be worth it. And I think when we get going again and the build times on sites are inevitably going to be longer because we're not going to be able to go at it like we used to be able to do it. The client's going to be spending more money on the venue, and they want to make sure that it's not a terrible mistake when they turn up. So software like this can really help in conjunction with the traditional CAD drawings.
And it's also, from the sound perspective, particularly if we're doing a TV show, somebody's going to decide the speakers have to move. They couldn't possibly be allowed to be there. So if everybody knows where they're going to be and exactly where they're going to be, then it stops the sound department from having to take them all down, move them 50 feet to the left, and put them all up again. Absolutely. I think it's terrific to see them actually there.
Yes, and the thing is, you can look at it from every angle, and you can make the decision pretty much weeks ahead of time, going, are we going to be okay with this, or can we work out another way around it, rather than having to do it once it's all up in the air and someone walks in and goes, oh, that doesn't work. And the sound guys are 3/4 of the way through tuning the system, and then they've got to move everything, and it alters everything. My knowledge of PA is not much, but I do know that it's a complete pain in the backside when you have to start retuning everything, and you've got your delays, and it's all far more complicated than a pair of basic
it's one of those recurring themes that we've been having for the past few weeks of, particularly with the new normal, this creating so that plans are much more encompassing and give the outsiders a better view the people, rather than just being straight for the technical departments, it's there for the producers, the client, whoever, so that they can actually get a real sense of what they're walking into.
Absolutely. I mean, companies like CT, and I know Pixel have done it, and other video rental companies have set up these presentation spaces. And I've been to the CT one. They've got two. They've got one with augmented reality, which is, I used to think, God, what's the point of all of that? But actually, if you're getting into high-end presentations and you want 3D movement in the background, so if you had, for example, a set with some people sitting behind a desk and a window behind them, as the camera moves, the perspective of what you see through the window behind them tracks with the camera. So if St Paul's Cathedral's in the top right, if you pan the camera slightly to the left, St Paul's Cathedral would disappear as if it would do if you were walking across the room. That's very expensive, and it's quite cutting-edge technology. It's very impressive. But equally, they've also got a studio which has just got a big screen at the back and some flats of LED onto which you can put any set that you want. And again, using software like this, others are available, you can look at every single camera shot and decide whether or not it works for you before you even turn up. So when you turn up, everything's set and you move on and you do your show. So there's many advantages to it, rather than just sort of holding your fingers in the air, crossing them and going, right, here we go, which is what's happened in the past. In a slightly smaller scale, I gave the game away earlier. Last year, Dick and I did a corporate presentation for an American company. Very good fun. But this is a rough representation of what it looked like. And again, with this software, as you can see on the left, for P left, which is the left-hand projector, it's got the elevation, the Z-axis and the X-axis off the central zero of the projector. From this, obviously, we can then map that into WYSIWYG or into rigging drawings so that the truss is in the right place and it's got its own truss. And you can see how much keystone is necessarily going to be involved depending on the height. So there's a lot of information there that we can use, and that can be transferred if you're doing really very complex projection models. This can all be exported to other software that does all of the blending and the mapping, and it can be, that's when you get these sort of Buckingham Palace type projection stuff. So this is a very simple version of it. And again, here we have a bit of set, just a bit of riser, and you can see some comfort monitors. And the comfort, but again, we can scroll through and you see this is like the prime view. And this would be the view that the presenter would get if they looked over their left shoulder, which you can show them and go, you'll see that screen and that screen if you look over your left shoulder. Equally, when they look forward, this is their comfort monitors. And the comfort monitors have been positioned so that they are as close to the stage, so you keep as many seats as you possibly can, but they're still visible by someone who is, 5'6" or something like that. So again, these sort of things are very, very powerful. And we can bring in sets, or it can be, if it's a flat set, the set is X number of meters by X number of meters, and we can draw it in, we can colorize it, and we can even put pictures on top of it to give it a sense of realism.
And again, going back to, this job, so this was Excel, as life had it, the flight that you guys were supposed to get on got delayed, so you didn't come out until the morning.
Yeah.
And we had rehearsals in the afternoon. Again, how accurate was this? Your prediction against the reality? It looks pretty good to me. That's what I remember.
If we used this software on the job, I mean, I did this. I did this up afterwards because we were using different technology, but. The beauty of this is one of the things that we had on that job was that in one location we had 3 standard 16:9 screens, and then we came into London and we had 3 super wide screens, but basically showing the same content. It was just that we were in Excel and there was an enormous amount of space. So to fill the space, we had big screens. Everything that was in that, if we'd used this software, which may not have been the best software particularly to use for that event, but had we used it, on the plane flying over, I could have reprogrammed everything on the fly on my laptop, loaded it onto the local machine, and within 10 minutes, we would have had a show. Whereas using things like E2, I actually had to reprogram the whole show in every single location that we were in, because every E2 is different, because you get them from different clients. So it can be extremely accurate. In the touring world, when you, especially when you go down to South America, for example, or even Australia, they sometimes have different older, newer products to the one that you're used to using. So before you turn up on site, you can change the resolutions of the screen so that your pixel mapping and your image quality is optimized for whatever display device you're using. And then again, you can do that sitting on the plane or sitting in your hotel room before you go to site. You load it onto their server and bang, it all works. It's extremely powerful and extremely useful in those situations. But it also, in this instance, really what I'm showing is its previs capabilities, which are also very powerful and probably more useful in our sort of corporate world than perhaps. I'm going to turn myself off now.
No, and it's something that we've talked about a lot over the last couple of weeks. So Dominic's been doing a test drawing, and he was showing us camera shots. So it's almost exact same process, but from the other end, he's been showing us his predictions of camera shots taken from the CAD side of the. And it's about the message and being able to show people what they're going to get. Yes,
and I think it cuts out. Even if you simply use it as a pre-visualization, you don't use it for programming. You can show everybody, from the lighting guys to the sound guys to the producers to the client to the poor bloke that's got to sit there and program the device at the back of the stage. This is what they want to do. And so often from a video point of view, and I'm sure it's the same with lots of lighting guys, they turn up on site and they go, right, what are we doing? And they go, oh, well, it's just a screen. And often, one of the things that we get, I did do a show, and I managed to get this one in this year, which was at Quagliano's, and it was a widescreen LED. And the dimensions of the screen are sent to the client and the video producers, and every year, the format of the video that comes back is wrong. It's the wrong shape. And so, so if they go, oh, just stretch it. So then they go like that, and it looks terrible. Or I end up like that, and it looks awful. And this is the thing. It's an eternal frustration. So out comes the high horse and a soapbox for me to stand on here, wave my arms in the air in indignation. But so often that happens with video, and I know this happens with sound as well. Is the production, so to speak, of software in its design is not fully thought through, or no one has been consulted, and you turn up on site and it's wrong, and the bloke on site has to re-edit, reformat, reshape, redo, whatever. And I'm old, so I remember working in a production company where we had to do all of that before we even left the building. But I also understand it's confusing. I did a tour with Lee Evans many years ago, and we had portrait screens at the side. And I sat in a meeting with broadcast video directors and editors and said, right, you've got to imagine we're just using the centre part of a 16:9 screen, and that's it. And they went, well, where's the rest of the picture? So it doesn't matter. It's an LED screen. We're just using the centre bit of it, and what goes off on the side. But what happens to it? And it's like, well, it doesn't
nothing.
You do nothing. You're never going to see it. And then what would happen is that they'd make some videos, and I'd have to reformat them because they'd frame things over here, and over here. So you get, Lee Evans with half a head cut. And it's like, oh, Christ. And I'd spend the first 3 weeks re-editing everything so that it looked right, which is fine, and it's all jolly good fun. But God, it's easier to do it beforehand. And it's not difficult, just sending out a little template going, it's got to fit in here, please.
But it's one of those things that, again, looking to the future, the production companies, the agencies are going to be under so much pressure from their clients. And if the agencies don't get the work, we don't get the work.
Yeah.
So everything that we can do to support them is critical. Absolutely. And as you say, for sound people, we've gone from a stack of CDs that a producer brings for walk-up music, to expecting you to all have it on the laptop ready to go, crash bang wallop, in the space of 10 years. And some of the older generation of sound people complain about that, and I just take it as a given. And I think, it is, I think for the technical community, of all of us, to support the agencies and to give them as much as we can to get it right before we get there.
I mean, I personally, speaking for myself, I'd happily spend 2 hours a week before the show drawing up a PNG, going, here's your template, make it all fit in there, please. And I'll do that, and I'd send it to them with a bow on top and say, see you on site, because it means I don't have to worry about it when I go on site, because
so Willis, Tom's primary role is as a designer. He's the guy who produces the plans that you and I see. So how does Tom react to what you've been showing? What's the view from his side?
I think it's fantastic, Willis, to hear some of the simple things that sometimes I know and sometimes I don't know. The header above an LED screen, the bottle screws. What a fantastic thing to remember! The bottle screws above it, the depth of a ground supported screen. Because sometimes somebody will say, "I've got 1.5 meter storage room behind the screen," and it's like, well, no, you don't. You've got 0.5 meter, because 1 meter's taken off by braces and such like. But thinking, going back to one of your points about how close a projector is to the rear projection screen, and therefore the actual physical box of the projector, how close it is to the wall. I think we've talked many weeks in a row about the quality of the reference material one gets. So maybe if you're going to ITV studios or the BBC, they're going to be really, really good quality. So from a television studio point of view, they're really good quality drawings. But potentially, we're not always going to the ITV studios or BBC. We might be going to a hotel or a conference space. And it's astonishing how the different variations in format of the drawings that one would produce, maybe Dom or myself might receive from the venue, because there's absolutely no reason why everyone should understand why they're so important. But you might get it from the marketing department, or you might get it from the technical department, or you might not be able to find it at all. And they say, "I'll just go through the website and see what you can find." So I believe, I think, Dick, you might have to remind people when that was. But I believe one of the discussions in episode 2 or 3 was about external references.
Yeah, so that was week 3. That was the week that I joined, and we talked to the likes of me who receive a plan from Tom or Dom. We bring it in as an external reference, create my sound layer, and send it back. And so
I must admit, I haven't actually watched that specifically, but I believe that from the conversation we've been having over the last few month or two, almost, I think it is now, that it was a really fascinating conversation, and some really positive things came out of it. And Dick understood what XRFs were about, and how you could insert XRFs or get information from external references. So one thing that in this circumstance I'm going to try and explain is what you can do in this hotel. So Dick is going to a new hotel next week with a new show, and the only reference material he's got available to himself is from the marketing department. He's been sent a PDF, which is brilliant, which is absolutely fantastic, because it's a PDF rather than a hand-drawn sketch, or rather than a Word document. It's actually really quite clear. It's got fire exits shown, etc. But there's 2 ways we can deal with it. So I'm just going to really quickly recap how you would use it as an external reference. So external reference doesn't necessarily need to be a DWG. It can be an image file or a PDF or a DWG. So I'm going to open as an external reference the first page of this PDF. It's positioned it in the center of the drawing, and what it is essentially a PDF, which is fantastic. So we can say it's called a PDF underlay. It's just another term, or it's trying to describe what that is a PDF in comparison to a DWG. But one thing that I sometimes struggle with is that what I can't do now in AutoCAD quickly is send this DWG to Dick. And the reason I can't send it to him is because there's an external reference, and because it's a PDF, in the same way as an image file you're not allowed to, you can't bind or insert the PDF, unless I'm wrong, Dom, you can't bind or insert the PDF into the DWG. So as a consequence, I would send this DWG to Dick, and I would say, oh, what's your opinion, Dick? Is the orientation of this room right? And he'd be like, I've no idea. I can't see what you're trying to reference. So what I'm going to do in this circumstance, I'm going to erase that external reference. I'm going to detach it. And in AutoCAD for maybe 3 years-ish, at a guess, you've been able to insert PDFs. And if it's a vector file, which potentially might have been produced from a DWG drawing a program like DraftSight or Vectorworks or AutoCAD, or more often than not, if it's from a hotel, maybe Illustrator or the equivalent of InDesign or something like that. So I'm going to import a PDF. There are probably fancier ways of knowing this is going to work than this, but all I do when I get a PDF of a venue, I try and import it. I want to import the first page, and what the computer is trying to figure out is there any vector lines in this PDF? And in this circumstance, I'm incredibly lucky, and we're going to save a lot of CAD time because there is it's a vector file. It's an original vector file, so it's not a scanned hand-drawn, or it's not a printed drawing which is then scanned. It's potentially, because you can see the edge, the paper marks on here, it potentially is, or most likely from InDesign or Illustrator or something like that. So now I have, it might be a little bit crude, but nonetheless,
sorry,
I have
just to interrupt, Tom. So it's those edge markers. That's what tells you that it's a vector file.
Not necessarily. I think what that's trying to tell me, and somebody on the call might be able to tell me otherwise, I think it's something to do with when you print the file. So when you send it to, so when you send it to the printer, they know where to cut it. And sometimes you might have color circles at the bottom or something like that. So the only reason I mention that is that it's the actual original file that potentially is made from Illustrator or something like that. If this was produced from AutoCAD, for example, I don't think they would be on there. For example, it wouldn't.
I think Tom, possibly one way of describing it is it's not a single image. This has components to it. It's come in and has components. And what you're about to show us is we can, unlike a single image, which we wouldn't be able to manipulate, you're hoping about to show us that we can manipulate this. And this is why it's so powerful. It's unbundled its components from Illustrator, and this is where the pleasure comes, so to speak.
And absolutely. So in this circumstance, I've got a really good feeling that it's not from a DWG program. This is from something other than, so probably from Illustrator. So when you import a DWG, it will often have PDF as the starting line of the layers, and then it will have the actual layer name. So if I was to print a PDF from AutoCAD and import it again, it would actually have the layers that I've named it. So what I'm going to do here is, it's a little bit crude, but I'm hoping that it's going to help Dick, who's going on a site survey tomorrow. I'm going to delete a few items, but I can't really see what I'm doing. So I'm going to use a command called set by layer, select all the layers that are left, and press enter. And so we've got a better understanding here. You can see fire exits, 3-phase, I presume, or maybe single phase. I'm not entirely sure what these symbols are, but we can delete those temporarily. But what this is not to any scale. So fortunately, the second page of the PDF that was sent to Dick had a few scales on. So what we can do now is we can use a measurement. So I'm going to use the length of the room. I'm going to scale it properly. Sorry, I'm going to use a scale command. I'm going to click on here. I'm going to use reference point of the first point, the second point here, and a measurement of 25570. Enter zoom extents, and we now have, if I change the dimension size to something bigger, I'm presuming if I'm going to do a dimension from here to this known point here, so therefore I typed in that measurement correctly. So one thing I would recommend, and Dom, if you have a different opinion, please voice it. I would recommend, if you're doing something similar to this, please try and use the largest measurement that you've been given. Because a very sensible other way of doing it is doing the width of a door, or the what else could you do? The width of double doors, or something similar, something that's known in real life. But the problem of using a small measurement is when you actually scale up to the very, very large measurements, there's a potential that you might have made an error by accident. So I would recommend always using the largest measurement possible, which in this circumstance is the length of the room.
I
So
totally agree,
what-
Tom. I think I'd say to anyone who's doing site surveys on somebody's behalf who's doing CAD, is get as many measurements as possible and not just a single door or something like that. It removes the error factor hugely by having the longest measurement possible. Sorry.
No, absolutely. No, thank you so much, Dom. So one last thing. So this is fantastic. So this is almost ready to send to Dick, but he has given me from the second page of the PDF a second measurement. So he said it's 11.8 meters wide, which is brilliant. I'm like, oh, I just measure across here, and it's not. I'm like, oh, I don't know where to go from here. So I do a few different measurements because we don't know where the 11 point. Whoops, if I do it in the right position, we don't know where the 11.8 meters came from. So if we try and get something close, 11.3, so we're not entirely sure. So, okay, in this circumstance, after a conversation with Dick, we say that actually the 12.2 should be the whole 11.8 meters wide. So what's so wonderful in comparison to having a PDF as an underlay or an image as an underlay, because this is a real DWG or a real DWG now, even if it is a bit crude, it's a real one, we can manipulate it if we make it into a block. So I'm going to delete those two dimensions. I'm going to copy this, which is Control-C. I'm going to do Control-Shift-V to place this as a block. I'm going to, in this circumstance, do a second block. So I now have my original, which I can delete. I have this block and this block, which is named, AutoCAD has named it, which is $, etc., which is totally arbitrary, but I've got two versions of it in this circumstance here. So the quickest way, there's multiple ways you can do this, and Don might have a different way of doing it after when I'm finished, but I'm going to scale this point here, and we know that Dick would desire that to be 11,800 millimeters. So in this here, because I've got the original, which on the right-hand side in the properties box, I have a scale of X and a Y as 1:1. But in here, I have a scale of X and Y as 0.9665. So I'm going to steal one of these. So in this circumstance, I desire that width, which I can see with the UCS here as the Y coordinate. I desire to copy that. So if I click in there, Control-C, and then Escape, and press the first block here, which has still got a scale of 1, and Control-V, Enter. So now I'm going to do dimension across, I'm going to do a dimension across here, which I'm very much hoping is 25570, and this dimension across here is 11.8. In comparison, because so therefore it's not the scale is not uniform anymore, which is in a real life scenario is not positive, but in this scenario, because we're early in the process and this is the best reference material we have, that's how I personally would do this drawing ready to send to Dick.
So that's why you created the two, so that you could keep one as its long dimension, shrink the other one to discover what ratio it was going to be. Is that what you were doing?
That's exactly what I was doing, Dick, because otherwise I'd have to do a calculation in my head or on a calculator. I'll click on eventually. So it's just a cheat.
Get the computer to do what it's good at. Yeah.
And so Dom, I don't know if you do it any other ways, but just quickly while I'm doing this, I'm just going to go to the layout space, do a new viewport. I can scale this. I haven't got a clue what scale this is going to be, but 1:75 maybe fits quite nicely. Lock the viewport, always lock the viewport, change the scale line to 1:75. And we now have a drawing which doesn't look amazing because you can see there's a few things missing. And I'm going to explode this block. And why quickly is that the circumstance? There's going to be something. Here we go. This is the reason why. So the color of the PDF solid fills, which is PDF is because it was a PDF, and the layer just is called solid fills, is 255,255,255, which is white. So as a consequence, nothing will show up. So I'm going to force it to a magenta color, go back to here, and then because all we could see before was that, which is not overly useful, I've just turned that on, and we now have I'm just going to check the dimensions, but we're just going to do that. Yeah, it's the correct dimensions. So this is a scenario I think we might have been mentioning last week, Dom, is do you do the dimensions in layout, which I'm in now, or paper space, or in model space? The answer is you're very welcome to do them in either. Because this is purely a 2D drawing, I might, in this circumstance, do them in model space. I think I might have mentioned last week, whenever I do 3D drawings, I always do the dimensions in layout.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. And I think I mentioned as well, it comes down to studio and who you're drawing for. I tend to do them in layout. On this occasion, as you said, this is a rough and ready to get out to Dick, who's going on the site survey. So actually just getting some dimensions onto this so he can then go and start checking it is the important bit and get it out the door. My preference is for, particularly because I end up sharing my drawings with a lot of people, I tend to dimensions and annotations in layouts. It means that the drawing's clean for everybody else and they don't have to see my stuff all over the model space, is my general rule.
So there's lots of stuff on there that, for example, fire exits, 3-phase power supply, single phase, what have you. Those symbols, can you change the layer of them so that they can be turned off as a layer?
Yes, 100% I can, but it's not automatic. So unfortunately, the importation isn't as clever as that. But yeah, I can quickly change that to. I don't have a layer set up, so I'm going to put it on the text layer. But yes, in that circumstance.
But it knows that there's something different, so it distinguishes them from the doors and the walls. It's not one big lump.
That's it. That's absolutely correct. Yes.
That's great. Because in mine, it's just a PDF underlay. So this is my training exercise.
Dick, I'd say that that's absolutely the way to go. But one positive, if at all possible, of importing it is because then you can change the X and Y. Because I could be speaking out of turn, but I'm fairly certain that when it's a PDF underlay, you can't change the X and Y scale ratio. They always have to match, so they all have to be 1-to-1 or 0.9 to 0.9. I believe that when it's a PDF underlay, you can't do that. And when you have a scenario where we know one measurement and we know the second measurement, but they don't match, I don't believe there's a way of scaling. I don't know if you agreed on, but I think that's the case.
I don't believe there is a way. No, you have to do the import and then do what you've just shown, because once it's in, it treats it as a reference and it doesn't want you mucking with it because it's a reference file. So.
Yeah. So that's how. If this is the only material that's available, and if Dick was asked me to do this job, this is how I personally would go about producing the first ever ground plan. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that a set contractor uses that space exactly to fit a piece of scenery inside. And I wouldn't recommend an LED screen is exactly fitted to that measurement there, but it's a very good starting point for the first discussions on site.
Your gut instinct, what sort of tolerances would you work to?
A fascinating question. I suppose it would be that I would have to answer that after seeing a few photographs of the space, because potentially these spaces here might, for example, be low ceilings. So you might design not to go in this at all. So as a consequence, you might want to go 250 millimeters off this line here. So if I do a horizontal construction line, you might want to go 250 millimeters from there, because I've never been to this space and maybe I could look online. But yeah, this might be low ceilings or for other reasons, but something along those lines, Dick.
Yeah, it's also the classic. Sweet. Somebody's left some table screwed to the wall there as well. It doesn't appear on the plan, but actually it's screwed to the wall on the venue. It's happened several times in my life.
Yes. So the other thing is so when I sent this to Tom and Dom, I missed off the PDF underlay that I'd started the plan with, and you were saying it's something about e-transmits.
Yes, that's a fascinating question. Could I explain that now? I'm going to do my very best. Okay, so Dom, do you want to explain e-transmits while I just do something?
Yeah, very quickly explain. E-transmit, while Tom's preparing himself, is a way of bundling up everything within the drawing. So if I switch the camera, I'm going to be really clever here. I'm trying to do this while Tom's doing stuff. It allows you to bundle up line weights, text, and everything that's a reference to it. And it bundles it all up into a zip file, and then it gives you the ability to send it out of the drawing. And it'll arrive at the other end, and the person has to unzip it, put it into one folder. You open the drawing at that point in time. Once you open the drawing at that point in time, it will then re-import everything into the drawing. So it's a secure way of sending everything out in one easy go. I hope if I cut
Do you
back
have
again, Tom won't be
to
getting me-
adjust the references or anything, or does it just happen?
It just happens. It basically takes your drawing and bundles it up as a thing. And hopefully, if not putting Tom too much on the spot here.
No. So I'm there now. So can I try and explain two different ways of doing this thing and explain how I personally use it, if possible? Okay, so I've just made some. I'm going to do something in here. I've done. Okay, so I'm going to close that. So I'm going to say no to that. So e-transmit is a way of sending something to anyone with everything attached. So everything might mean a plot style. It might mean the line types. It might mean samples of render filters or something like that. But in this circumstance, what Dick would desire is a DWG with the PDF attached in the correct place, because I've scaled this by an arbitrary measurement. He doesn't know what that is. So it's really important that it's exactly as is. I go to File, I go to e-transmit. It asked me, would I like to save the drawing? I said, yes, please, that would be fantastic. Okay, so what this is, so I have a tree here, and the tree consists of Hilton Birmingham Metropole.dwg. That's my personal drawing I've set up. Why is that? There we go. I have, and there's two things, there's two roots of that tree. So the branch of the tree might be described as this, and the roots are PDF underlay and the AutoCAD plotter configuration file, which is completely standard as far as I'm aware, but nonetheless, I might change it to some extent. And what it is I'm going to save that on the desktop. And you can see here, it's called a .zip file. So if I save that, it will take 2 seconds. I'm going to close this, and I'm going to open a zip file on my desktop, which you might be able to see. And within it, there we go. So there's a few things. So there's the DWG, and there's also the PDF. The PDF should be, there we go, there's the original, a 2-page PDF from the venue. And hopefully, if I open the DWG here, it's a read-only file, which is fine because it's in a zip file. It has the PDF in its original location. So that's how you would e-transmit something that has an image or a PDF. There's a workaround where you can make an image embedded in a drawing, which I can't necessarily explain right now, but there's a way that I have a workaround, so you don't need to e-transmit it. So I'm going to say close this drawing, but there's another way of e-transmitting which is not called e-transmitting. So you might hear someone say, can you bind a drawing together? A binding, sorry, this is a thing in 2021 which keeps on coming up for no obvious reasons. So binding a drawing is getting everything that's meant to. So on my desktop, I've got a drawing that's called Layout 1. If I go to external references and if I attach the DWG called XREF here, and I say, yes, that's fine, just place that there. So it's slightly grayed out. So you can see that an external reference called XREF, I click on it and it's slightly grayed out. So if I were to open it, you would be able to see that it's a white line. And in this circumstance, I don't know if it's clear enough on the stream, but it's clearly not bright white. It's a mid-gray. So that is telling me that, sorry, you can change that in options, but in this circumstance, I have it as a mid-gray so it's obvious to me it's an XREF. So I could either go File, e-transmit, or I personally, when there's DWGs, it's just a personal thing. There's no reason why I do it. But I like to do the binding, which is what e-transmitting is, myself. So that's a very visual tool that I know for certain that it's been successful. So I right-click on XREF, I say bind, and I click on insert, and I click OK. So that has changed from a grey to a white. There's no external references, and that drawing is now ready to send off. So there's the reason that I wouldn't be able to do that on the PDF is, as we discussed earlier, with a PDF underlay, you're not able to bind the PDF into the drawing. So there's there's two ways of doing it, but the reason you have to do e-transmit when there's a PDF is because you can't bind it. But in my personal opinion, that when I do the equivalent of a PDF, an e-transmit with a DWG XREF, I personally bind each XREF one by one, so that I know for certain the drawing is absolutely, there's no reason why the DWG isn't attached.
So I've always kind of believed that the binding is the final part of the process. When everything's happened, everybody's made their changes, that's when you bind it and send it out as that's it, finished. Is that right?
Necessarily, I sometimes send them out on projects that if the venue want to receive a drawing with everything in, and I don't know how good the CAD person is on the other end, or it may be just somebody who's got a license that's opening up. If I bind everything into the drawing at that midpoint, so I actually resave my drawing as with a bind initial after it, because I want to muck up with my original drawing. So I save as, give it a bound on the end of it, and then I will bind the DWGs, as Tom said, into the drawing at that point in time. Because I know when they open that drawing at the other end, it will be exactly as I sent it to them as I last saw it. There's no chance they can't, there might have been any problems in the e-transmit and then bringing stuff in. They will see exactly the same. It does make drawings bigger and heavier, and when you and I do whole halls, that will chunk up a drawing quite a lot. But you can be either selective what you bind in, or have everything in it and just, that's the way it is. So,
and Dom, I don't know about you, but the reason that I personally go to external reference, right-click bind, is absolutely for certain that I know that I've done the right thing, and I know for certain that what I see on my screen is what the client is going to see in Spain. With the e-transmit,
there is ambiguity there. It can go wrong as they unpackage the e-transmit. With a bound drawing, it will, as you click save after binding, that is what they'll open and that is what they'll see. And the nice thing about going to XREF, if you do it, and particularly if you've got 5 or 6 DWGs in there, if you select them all and hit bind, you'll just see them disappearing as it pulls them into the drawing, and you'll end up with what Tom has, nothing. You'll just have the drawing name and nothing in it, and everything then is definitely inserted in the drawing. The only little one you have if you're all working.
Yeah, it's quite a satisfying thing. Can I just open an image? Can I just I don't know. So another way of inserting an image into the drawing is if I just download save image as. So, and I'm going to go to desktop, and so what you can do. So this is the Google image. And I can go to external references, attach a image. I can go to my desktop and I do, is it called download? There we go, it's called download. So what this is, an external reference, I can right click on it. I can't bind it. So therefore in this circumstance, I'd have to use the e-transmit. And if, as we just discussed, I prefer not to use the e-transmit if at all possible, what you can do is, sorry, if I erase that, and I very much hope it's going to work. If I right-click on the image, which is here, I say open with Paint, select all, copy, go back to AutoCAD and place it in here. I say yes. So it's the image is in there. It makes the file size bigger, but nonetheless, there's no external reference. So that's how, in the unlikely event I desire to use images within AutoCAD, I try my very best not to. That's one way that you can alleviate the problem about when you send it to Dick, for example, that Google image is missing because you're not able to use e-transmit, or the e-transmit didn't work properly. One way of doing it is right-clicking on the image, opening in Paint, Control-A, Control-C, and Control-V in AutoCAD.
Yeah, so this is where I started of taking CADs into the sound prediction program, which then produces a little 3D heat map that I would then export out of it and bring back into CAD as an image that shows me how the speaker coverage is going to be overlaid onto the CAD. And when I did the little Sound 101 Lefts talk, I showed people here was a real venue that had really been designed, and with the speaker positions that I was allowed to use, why it wasn't going to work, because you could just see from this, and it was just an image, but we're back to what I was talking to Willis about, of your gut instinct and the plans start to match and become this more interesting communication tool.
It's absolutely brilliant. I think it's hopefully people learned a lot there, because that is a really good 101 skill for people to have, to be able to either bring images in or references in, but also be able to get their drawings out of the door. And maybe we talk about publishing next week as well as another thing of being able to make a load of PDFs all bound into one document you can send to a client, and it just arrives and they can see it all. And then I know, Dick, you've been working on I forget the name of the DWG compare program, basically, and maybe we talk a bit about that and what people can do if they don't have a CAD license. So,
yes. So yes. Sorry.
Absolutely brilliant, and I think that's a good place to stop it, as Dave would say. I think hopefully we give people lots of information. As always, if you need something and want to learn something, do let us all know. We're fairly easy to be found. And thank you very much indeed, all. And thank you very much, Willis, for joining us and giving us such a wonderful insight into the world of video. And if anyone else from video wants to join in, you've been very quiet in lockdown so far, video. So speak up.
And we want a wardrobe person or wigs.
Yeah, well, yeah, some of us need a wardrobe person, Dick.
Well, it's absolutely brilliant. So I think it's bye-bye time from all of us. So thank you from me, and hope you see you all next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye-bye.